this salon for Spiral Dynamics Integral Live called Integral Political Party ? I am Josh Schlossberg. I am an advocate on environmental and humanitarian issues for 30 years. I was once asked to run for city council by an outgoing city councilor, and I thought about it for 3 seconds before telling her no. I am running for president of the United States in no, I'm just kidding. What we're going to talk about in this salon is a variety of things, including, so what would an integral political policy look like? What are some potential integral policies? What would an integral politician look like, or how would they act, or what would they say, or whatever? And what would an integral political party resemble? So kind of want to just open up the discussion. The way we've done it before is you can raise your hand or the reactions. That's just easiest to manage that way. Before that, I think we should just go around and everyone say who you voted for in the last election. I'm kidding. I'm kidding again. Okay, no more jokes. We'll just get started. I'll kick us off with something, and then maybe we can go from there. So I am skeptical as to whether or not a policy or a politician or a party that is clearly on the face advocating for what we would maybe term to be integral policies would be very popular. I think it would be not the most popular thing in the world, but I'm open to other possibilities. So what do folks think? If somebody actually was coming at it with like, all right, here is a postmodern policy, here is a modernist policy, here's a traditional thing, we're going integral on this. What do you think, public? Do you think the public would be into it, or what? So Brandon's shaking his head. So I'm gonna call on you like I'm the teacher or something.
So I guess it's like a question of just like, what's a productive way to engage in politics? And I don't know if being explicitly integral is the best way of going about it. In my mind, the stage we're at, we need to be building social and cultural solidarity around kind of metamodernism and integral thinking. Because when you think of something like what percentage of like a population in a society needs to be at a particular level to actually start to change the center of gravity, I believe it's around, I think Ken Wilber, some other people said it's around like 10% of the population. And if you think at like people who are would grok what metamodernism is like all about, I mean, probably in the most developed countries in the world, I would be surprised if it were more than like 1% of like the population. So it seems like we still have some more work to do before we can kind of be like as explicit about it as maybe some of us would like.
I hear you. So your take is that the world's not ready for that. So does that mean we just stay with Democrat, Republican, conservative?
Yeah, I think at least in a country like the United States, I think working outside of that in the political sphere specifically, like starting a third party or whatnot, is a form of game denial. So if you look at like what has actually been, I'm talking about the United States right now because that's what I'm like most familiar with. So this might be less true in other countries with like, for example, proportional representation and true multi-party democracy. But at least in the United States, what actually changes the center of gravity is changing the two political parties from within. So you see kind of two, kind of a polarity of this in the United States is looking at like Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side and Donald Trump on the Republican side, where one has kind of moved the Overton window for more people accepting kind of more social democracy type policies. And on the Republican side, we've seen with Trump and the MAGA movement, we've seen kind of a shift from neoliberalism towards, I would argue, a more fascistic form of politics. So I think if you look at that, that's actually in like a system like ours, that's actually how like political change like happens. And I think like denying that is, like I said, a form of a game denial. So we kind of have to work with the system that exists and not abstain because it doesn't like meet like our ideals. Just how do we like make work within a very flawed system?
So Brandon did bring up the point that we're talking about US stuff, but it doesn't have to be only that. So I know Safrir is living in Israel. I don't know if anyone else is living in another country, but Safrir or anyone who's living in another country, do you want to talk about whether you feel like Brandon's statements of working within the two parties is the best way of doing it? I mean, I don't even know what the party system is in Israel as much.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I can speak about it for more than an hour, so you can stop me whenever. First of all, I've been writing and created a video in the past, let's say 5 years. I've been working about how to use spiral dynamic in order to create a better system, a better political system. And I published videos in Hebrew, and I rebranded it as a political movement, which I called flexible democracy. And I publish and I translate this video with subtitles in English. Did anyone here seen it? You seen it? Yeah,
I don't know about it. Where'd you put it?
I will publish it here. You can copy it and see it later. It's only the 5th chapter. Basically, if I want to summarize it, first I was trying to understand what insight does a spiral dynamic can say about the faults of the democratic system, and this is a whole new you can talk about it a lot, but if I summarize it, to see the problem of the democracy from second tier point of view, what you find out is that the attachment of people to opinion is something that the democratic system is supporting. They support you, you go to vote. They want you to have an opinion. They want you to have an identity. They want you to be a good democratic citizen is to have a belief system, a structured belief system, which is, when you look at it from second tier, this is the most difficult problem, because if you look at the political system of the way to organize and solve problem of the whole society, then when it comes to problem solving, instead of being creative and think about how to improve the system and how to really solve the problem, people all they can do inside the democratic system is argue about their own opinion and have to fight against other opinions, which is taking the all energy and all the intelligence out of creativity of how to solve things. So the most difficult thing, if you want to add some values from second tier spiral dynamic into the system, is the ability to have some flexibility in the opinion of people. And I find it that, first of all, I had to go through 10 years of process myself in order to be able to see the other side. I come originally from the left side of the map, and it took me 10 years of personal psychology to understand the right side or the religious side or the Jew in Israel, it's the Jewish nationality side, which when you start to understand real deep spiral dynamic, I can really emphasize with people that they are developing racism. Of course, racism is an unhealthy manifestation of healthy values that some of the rights part has. And before the first step for me is for my mind to be flexible enough to find in every opinion, it doesn't matter even if it's a killer, any opinion, to find the values that motivate them. And after understanding the value, then I can start analyzing if it's healthy or not healthy for this specific problem. And this is a big difference, because before that, when I was looking at political maps and the rest of the people around me, when they are looking at political maps, they have opinions. This is good, this is bad. Trump is bad. You should never support his opinion, no matter what he say. And the shift of the ability to understand that the people that speaking completely nonsense to you, to understand the sense that they have, is the first step of changing the system. And we need more and more people in this way. Spiral dynamic is supporting this ability to see the healthy part of other sides. So this is the first step. The second step is the ability to talk, to argue, and to take decisions which you eliminate your previous opinions. So what I was writing and in the video I was talking, so the most important flexible democracy is the ability to create values that eliminate personal opinions. So when you look at the philosophy of democracy, we know that there are breaks in balance for power. You know about it, right? The court, the separation of the authorities. In the United States, you have a parliament and senate. In Israel, we don't have parliament and senate, for example. But sometimes they're balancing each other. But they're balancing the power of each other. So the next step in vision of creating a second tier political system is to create a balance and breaks for personal identification and personal opinions in order to solve problem. So, and this is very difficult, just to, even the most intelligent people, also here in this group and in the community, when they're going into a real argument, let's say about environment, or let's say about wars, about security, about education, it's very difficult for them to eliminate their personal opinions. And of course, it's impossible to eliminate personal opinions without eliminating the free speech, the freedom, the free speech. So how do you do it? You know, when we have a free speech and a free society and a free democracy, it means that people can talk about crazy stuff, like being racism. It's part of the free speech, or being and you know, religious are flourishing in democracy, especially in Israel. The Jewish is flourishing like nowhere else in the democracy because of the free speech. And they use the free speech to speak against democracy because they want the rules of the Torah, of the Bibles. So it's very, very difficult to even make people imagine that we can talk and take decisions together without our previous opinions. So the first step, I believe, in the vision of creating a new political system, it's have to have some kind of a balance and breaks for personal opinions when it comes to decision making. The second thing is right now in democracy, people are elected by groups, and they need to support those groups. This means if I elected even by liberal Democrats, I have to support liberal Democrats. I cannot in no way look at the full system. I cannot see the whole system. I cannot think about a solution for the whole system. This is another flaw in the current democracy. So when people are elected by their opinions and by their identification, they will never be able to support the whole system. So the next step is to elect leader not by their identification or their opinions. And of course, I'm talking very, very far future. We have to start small, with small people that agree that, okay, we are doing a political party that we are telling from our election manifest, from before the election, don't elect us because we have a fixed vision. We are not liberal or Republican. We are not, you don't elect us because of our opinion. You are electing us because our ability to solve problem good and to have a systematic thinking. Just you can elect us only for our flexibilities. So this is what I'm talking about a lot, is about the shifting from opinion-based democracy to flexibility and system thinkers democracy. And I don't know if I talk too much, but for me, those are the first steps. Of course, there are many, many other steps. But for people, the first step is for people to agree that opinions are the worst enemy of creating a healthy society. And how we can continue with free speech, which means we are not eliminating any opinions, we just put another value above our opinion when it's come to system thinking, that we don't choose decision from opinions.
Great. Thank you, Seth, that's excellent. Yeah, thanks for your analysis there. Definitely encourage folks to check out that link. So Bet, what's your take on things?
I think someone has a coffee cup. Somebody. Brandon?
Brandon had a coffee
Oh,
cup.
yeah, I was just using that to demonstrate that we've been using that to respond when somebody says something. So I'm done.
Do you want to say something?
Just real quick. I think human psychology reacting within like the large sort of societies that we live in today, we're groupish by nature. So I'm not sure we can entirely like eliminate that. And I think we have to work with that like in mind, that human beings are always in large societies going to organize themselves around like interest groups that are going to have incompatible goals sometimes. I do like the idea. I think one way of working with that you mentioned that I think is really productive is just to say that we can be flexible in how we respond to that, as opposed to kind of like more rigid like interest groups. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Can I respond quick for this?
Sure, real quick, and then get on to.
This is why I say we don't want to eliminate free speech. We understand the psychology is that people will keep their opinion, but what spirodynamic I can prove it in my psychology, is that you can go above your opinion. yes, or psychology is your opinion. And maybe if I cannot go above my opinion, I can understand that fighting opinions are bad decision making. That's it. And then I will keep my opinion. I will let others keep their opinion, free speech. It's just when it's come to decision making for the society, I will prefer the people will do it above their opinion.
Sure. So we got Bet and Elin. If anyone else wants to say anything new, raise your hand with the reactions. If you want to respond to a point that somebody has made and kind of want to stay on that specific topic, use your coffee cup. So, all right, well, Bet.
Hey, hey, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, so I was a longtime leader in Toastmasters, and so I'm going to draw on that for this because I don't know why politics has to be, maybe I'm just idealistic. Why does it have to be some kind of crazy thing? Leadership is just about solving problems. And one of the biggest revelations I had when I became the district director, which was in July 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, I realized that leaders run on a platform of being like reactionary to previous leaders and like, oh, I'm going to solve like this previous problem. I would solve it like this. They have a platform where they get really excited about like, oh, I have all these solutions to these problems. But the truth is, as soon as you get into leadership, the problems that come up, you know, those previous problems are already, there's something happening that's probably fine. And all these new problems come up and you never have a chance to go back and be like, oh yeah, we're going to fix that thing that happened in the past. It's like, it's just never stop, smash in your face, like the next issue that's burning and fire. And so it really doesn't matter. I totally agree with Saspir. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. You just need to deal with it practically, trying to make the best solution for everybody every moment. So that's just like a glimpse into what it really is like to lead a group of people. And my district is 2,500. So it's just like nonstop slam in your face, crisis after crisis. All right, that's my point. So I like Saspir's point. I liked it a lot.
Great. Thanks, Bet. And yeah, I just want to comment on that really quick. And I'm actually going to pass over the torch. Bet is going to be my successor at 9 because I need to go actually harangue a few politicians in my town at a town hall thing. But so I was a long time, and I still am in some ways, advocate, activist, worked in nonprofit stuff, lobbying politicians, whatever, however you want to look at it. And here's what I noticed. I noticed that, so opinion, sure. Individuals are going to have those. It would be nice if they could raise above them for the common good. I don't know if it's likely, but I think that there's a healthiness in pushing from particular perspectives, because that seems to be the only way that it ends up in a way that makes sense. And this is an example people won't like, and I don't actually care for their advocacy, but one of the most successful advocacy groups in the United States is the NRA. And you could say, oh, they're because they have all this money. They do have money, but they don't actually have as much as people think. Their success, I posit, is that they have a hard line. They're like, we budge nothing on this issue. Even if most of our members want to budge, we budge not. And that is this brick wall that the politicians have to contend with. So we barely do anything about gun laws. And
what is NRA? Sorry, what is NRA?
Oh, sorry, National Rifle Association. So it's the gun lobby. So again, I'm not advocating for that, but we got to learn from what is going on. I've seen most advocacy groups basically turn into political groups. So I've seen them turn into politicians where they're like, well, maybe the compromise, and I don't even think that's their job. And then I've seen the politicians turn into the activists. And when a politician is the activist, like, we will let our government shut down before we budge 1 inch, that is where things fall apart. So I'm seeing these roles flipped, and I think that's not good. Elin, if I'm pronouncing that right, sorry if I'm not.
Oh, hi, sorry. I just needed a second to unmute myself. Hello, good morning from DC. This is Elen. I actually wanted to respond to Safrir. I actually went ahead and sent you a friend request on Facebook. If you would prefer, I connect with you on another platform like LinkedIn or email. I'm happy to do that instead. So Safrir, my family is from Eritrea. And I've had a long-standing interest in the politics of the region, including like Israel, Palestine, etc. And so what was coming up for me as I was listening to you was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm because last, I want to say in the spring of 2021, there was a room on Clubhouse that went on for about 12 days, if I recall correctly, hosted by an acquaintance of mine, an Israeli Jewish acquaintance of mine, where is people of Israeli and Palestinian backgrounds just sat and talked. And it wasn't, there were ground rules that everyone respected, but they just came and shared their sorrows, their joys, their triumphs, their frustrations. And it was so beautiful. It was so, so, so beautiful. And for me, it was an example of what is possible when people who are well-meaning, even if they're at various developmental stages, come together with the goal of promoting harmony. And so honestly, if you're open to it and if this is the right space, I would so love to hear about your perspective on that particular issue through the lens of spiral dynamics, because I've spent a good deal of time thinking about it, not just with regards to Israel and Palestine, but also with regards to Eritrea and Ethiopia. As you may know, there's been a war. Well, the war is supposed to be over, but there's been a conflict on the border between Eritrea and Tigray for the last 20 plus years. It's part of the reason there are so many Eritrean refugees in Israel. So I've also spent time thinking about, developmental politics and how they are related to these sorts of really intense conflicts along the lines of ethnicity or religion. So anyhow, I'm complete. I'm Elen and I'm complete. Thanks.
Can I answer or should you go
Yes.
on?
Oh, if it's okay with you, Josh.
Yeah, go ahead, and then we want to get to some other folks too.
Yeah. First of all, I was grown as a child in a very peace-supported environment, and since I was 12, we went to meet Palestinians, and I grew up in the atmosphere of peace. And I don't know if you know the history, but in 1995 there was an agreement between the Israel and Palestine to start a Oslo agreement, what was supposed to start a process for having a Palestinian country, and this process has been shut down by both sides, mostly the extremists of both sides. And right now the situation is that the extremists in the Palestinian side, the Hamas, they are the most powerful in the Palestinian street and in Gaza. And the right side of Israel is now in the government, and very racist people, anti-peace are so we did a lot. I did in the past 20 years many campaigns. As I'm a producer and I produced campaigns, even political. I made a lot of political campaign for organization like Peace Now and for left government, left parties of the government. And I can say that all this process of meeting is from spiral dynamic is a green process, is coming from the value which say that war is bad, violence is bad, and that we all share a common equality And this side is very important in the process, but the result of it all around the world didn't bring a solution for the mainstream hatred and the mainstream. So we need another value system in order. We have to use it. We have to use the meeting, and we have to use the green values of understanding each other. And we need all those values, but it's not enough. We need another values system. This is why I'm trying, on top of all those peace and understanding of the other side activities, to go somewhere that the whole can go. Like if you go to extreme Palestinian, that the Jewish came and took his parents' house and is now living for all his life in a refugee camp in Gaza, and from the age he was born till now, all he knows is to hate Israel, he will not come to those meetings, never. Also in the Israeli side, if you go to Orthodox Jewish, who's believing that the Messiah will come, the revolution will come only when Jewish will control all Israel, and this is all he knows, he will never meet Palestinian. He will never talk. And now there are those people are in power in both sides, and they are the ones that are taking decisions. So you cannot tell them meet and talk. They will be in their opinion. You cannot change their opinion. But in a long, slow process, you can add another value system. We said, okay, yes, you have a good value system, which said that there is no justice as the Jewish took your home and you need to fight. It's a great value system. But now see that this value system doesn't make solution. So it's time to put another value system above this value system in order to make a more sustainable life. And that's maybe will open a small door for more and more people to come. And maybe in a few years, decade, we have a strong political body that is saying, okay, we're not taking decision, but by our feelings of hate to each other, which is not right now impossible. Right now, the whole discussion is about they did to us, we did to them, and we are right and they are wrong. This is the whole dialogue. There is no dialogue about how to solve things.
Great.
Sorry for answering so long.
Oh, thanks, Zafir. All right, so we got Paul, Susan, and folks who haven't spoken yet, Alliston, Marjorie, David, Ahmad, we'd love to hear from you as well. So Paul, go ahead.
I guess I'll go back to your original. I'll start by going back to your original question, Josh. I'm kind of like Brandon, and I'm very, very skeptical of the possibilities of an integral political party / process right now. And the truth is not just here in the United States, but even around the world. And I think that partly comes, well, not partly. It really, the reason why I'm not very optimistic about it is that, you know, if we're saying a democratic system is the way to go, and a democratic system is managed or regulated through a political process, whatever party it is, it has to be centered in the V-meme of the society, of wherever it is. You know, if you're a European country that has, 6 or 7 different political parties, you can have a political party for each V-meme. US, let's just say the US doesn't do that. I don't know what the hell the US does now, but because we're dealing with so many V memes. I don't see that there's any political way to deal with it. How do you know, I agree with Safria. We need a new overarching set of values to supersede the lower values, but I don't know how to do that in a democratic political process. And I think what exacerbates the problem, particularly here in the United States at a national level, is that we give so much responsibility for so much to the political process. I mean, the political process, for whatever set of reasons, we kind of say they have to solve, we convert every problem into a political process. And so we've invested way, way too much responsibility in that democratic political process. Now, how to get around that? Well, first of all, I have no idea. Probably, but I think there's one tiny example that if I had to say what might be an integral transition, that is an administrative and governance process that is alive and well and has been used in many places at the local level in the United States. And that is in some communities, they have a mayor, but some communities also have what's called a city administrator or a city manager. And, you know, broad stroke, what that system does is it says, you know, there are things that have to be done in our community that they just have to be done. I mean, you know, the garbage has to be collected, the sewer system has to work, you know, whatever that spectrum is, these must be done. And you can't submit them to a political process to where somebody says, you know, where it's proposed that we're going to fix the sewer system, but somebody on the route says, well, I don't want to pay any more taxes to pay for that, so I oppose this new sewer system. Now, in the cities that have city managers, they also have elected mayors that handle, I'll just say the overall governance, that those parts that are political. I kind of see, I wonder if that's not a model that could be applied more even globally. Is it, again, getting back to Safria's very, very important point, there has to be an overlying set of values or norms or whatever, you know, and I'll reduce it down to say rules or things that we deem need to be done, like protect the environment, you know, and vest the responsibilities for that with somebody that quite frankly has dictatorial power. But at the same time, to protect things like, as Freire says, you must have freedom of speech. People must have the ability to express their opinion freely. You still have to have a political governance system. How you do that, how you determine that, you know, if a company president says, you know, yeah, I'm polluting this river and it's causing tens of thousands of people to get cancer, but so what? You have to have somebody of authority has to say, okay, well, you're going to jail then, or we're shutting your company down. So in a sense, it's that balance. And you could call this a political process, I don't know, but there has to be a balance between, again, going back to what Bett talked about, leadership. You have to have a balance between dictatorial leadership and democratic leadership. And hopefully the rules of the game are of that higher value that Sophia talked about.
Great, thank you, Paul. So Brandon has a response to that, and then we'll get to Susan.
Yeah, so I think like just to follow up on what like Paul said, cultural change here is primary, and then political change is derived, and it codifies that. So if you look at like social movements that have actually been successful in their goals, think of like gay marriage acceptance, for example. So that was largely a cultural movement just to get people's value systems to change. The primary arena for that wasn't like in the courts or the political system. It was, shows like with gay characters on it, just to get like people to accept it and not see it as like weird. So it was like a value change, and that gets codified in the political system. So like the political aspect is derived and secondary.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
there's
very-
a quote by the right-wing guy, Breitbart, was politics is downstream from culture. So I do think I agree that. At the same time, there are probably examples of tough shit, here's the law, and then people just get used to it also. But I would say overall, you're probably right. Susan, what are you curious to hear your perspective on things?
I'm interested who here and if you all have discussed or are familiar with holacracy. Sophia, yes?
A bit. Why don't you explain a little bit of that?
Yes,
So,
yes. Yeah, okay, you explained it, but and I can after that respond maybe about why we should rebrand it a little bit differently. But yeah, explain it first.
So I don't think, back to the earliest proposition of the group, should there be an integral party? I think the concept of integral and the philosophy of integral and spiral dynamics, all of it is a brand. You'd have to say what it is. And given that most people are in the lower tier of perspective worldview, as opposed to the upper tier of a perspectival, you're going to run into the problem that people who are being encouraged to think about the next steps up are going to reject that in some lower level way. So I don't think it can be a theme or a organizing concept. But I do think through, as you were talking about, Brandon, with the cultural shift in gay marriage, using the modeling that popular culture could offer in the way of mostly TV shows, but then it became more ubiquitous. That was probably the most successful avenue. And we're seeing it rapidly come online for the broadening of sexual identity, gender identity, I should say. So I think actually the modeling is a good avenue for introducing the effects of spiral dynamics and integral philosophy before labeling it that. And I think it could also be an aspiration to elect officials that do come from tier 2, who can look at all of the value of the healthy side of the spiral dynamics and do what they can through modeling and speaking and leading to encourage the health versus the toxicity. What we're locked in now is not so much the different levels of spiral dynamics, but the toxic expression of most of them, because we're insecure. We're financially insecure, we're socially insecure, we're culturally insecure, and we're very divided geographically, but sprinkled. We couldn't even divide the country up into the conservative part of the country. So, things like regional government or, changes like that, which would also be radical, I just don't think are probable. So looking at a practical aspect of holacracy is that, first of all, it's a level playing field, and it's a very strict but effective and flexible, back to the flexibility idea, method of running a company or ostensibly a government. And right now it's only been tried in companies, and it's a real hard slog to get an existing company to dump the hierarchy of CEO down to drones into this thing. But again, if we could extract, and Brian Robertson, who's one of the co-founders of Holacracy, would argue that unless you're doing the whole enchilada of Holacracy, you're not doing Holacracy. But I've been troubled by the complexity of Holacracy, integral philosophy, spiral dynamics as a model that we can pull other people or even discuss with people who are not conversant with it already. But the idea that we could look at a leader at least and aspire to something as someone who could model, encourage, and engage cultural entities like Hollywood or wherever that exists now into and media into modeling this kind of flexible, inclusive, and heterodoxical approach to looking at both sides. And I could be a left winger and approach a right wing position or idea or just a schism with some effort and you know, this idea that the effort is a long time rebuilding, but for someone respectable in your camp to suggest there's something valuable, even though it might be coming out of the mouth of somebody that you revile, would be another way. So my interest as we're having the discussion and coming into this would be how do we migrate toward something that we could then create as a value once we've like infiltrated the hierarchy, which will still continue to exist for some time, to someone powerful and popular or acceptable enough to make people on both sides or all sides comfortable that they have a voice. But here's the last piece about holacracy that I'd like to say. It's organized in something called circles. There's governance circles, and then there's implementation or executive circles. When someone's a leader of a circle, let's say I'm the leader of this whole circle, and I ask you all how you feel about a change in our format for these meetings. And I listen to everybody, and you all have a different idea than Zoom. And I reflect on it, and I realize that even though you all have valid opinions, Zoom still is going to be the best solution for all of us, even though no one likes a Zoom. If we could have, and the decision-making rests with the circle leader. And the people in the circle have to feel that they've been heard. There's very, very well-defined meeting protocols so that that is addressed and that people are able to raise objections and have their voices heard. But ultimately, there is an acceptance of the decision of the, and so here's your autocracy versus democracy. We do elect officials to represent us, and those officials have been, as we've pointed out, kowtowing to the people who will keep them elected, as opposed to the people that they're holistically responsible for. So anyway, these are just some ideas that have arisen out of my background and the conversation that has taken place so far. I really appreciate everybody's thoughts.
Great. Really quick, I just want to step down as the facilitator. I'm going to pass it along to Bet. I have to go engage in the very broken political process right now, so I'll resign.
Josh,
Yeah.
I want you to know that by the time we're done, we're going to have it all solved.
Well,
We've got it. We've got it, Josh.
That's
right, guys?
Yes, save the tree, we save the world.
Perfect.
Yeah,
All right. Well,
20
thanks
more,
everyone.
20 more minutes, Josh. All right. Have a good time, Josh. Go fix those. Go fix it. Go fix that political problem in your area.
Can I ask for Susan or
Did you put the coffee cup up, Sphere?
no, because when Susan asked about holacracy, you said that I would like to comment. But yeah, go ahead to Bill. Okay, just one.
I feel like we've heard a lot from you, Sphere. I just want to be like fair to everybody.
I talk too much. I know. I speak too much today. Let's go to Bill.
Let's go to
That's actually a
Bill.
holacracy thing.
Yeah,
Right, exactly. So I have to warn you, I have an appointment with a plumber coming here shortly. So I may have to leave suddenly, but I was glad to hear Susan bring up holacracy. Bet and I went to the Integral Conference a few months ago, and I did listen to, I think it's Brian, who's the head of it.
Brian Robertson.
Right. And so I'm attempting to apply holacracy to my ophthalmology practice right now, and all of my staff think I'm absolutely nuts. They really, it's just funny, but it has, if nothing else, it has increased communication within the office. And office meetings are not, I'm the boss and you're going to do what I tell you to do. But that's what they're used to. They're just used to me telling everybody what to do. And, you know, one of the things is if I look at 4 people and say, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and that doesn't really help them to buy into what they're doing. It's my idea that we should do this, but it's not their idea. And so in these circles or these meetings, you bring up ideas, say, you know, hey, we have a tension here, we have a problem, and they can all sort of see that, yes, there's a problem. And then we can sort of decide how it might be done. But it's a more democratic way of looking at things. There still have to be boundaries. I still don't know how well it is going to work, but it is funny. I will say I had one person who just didn't want to do any of this stuff, and you're asking people to reflect on what they do, and it becomes a little philosophical. You know, why do you come to work every day? What is the purpose of what you do? And they don't really think about it. But when they learn to think about it, they sort of enjoy it. And then they sit there and they say, oh, this is all nonsense. Why are we doing this and all that? And then one of them says, well, you know, this was a good idea that he brought up. And if you just let them talk and let them be heard, rather than shut them up and say, that's stupid, I'm not going to listen to you, that's wrong, you know, but you just get into this dialogue. It's pretty amazing how it's just helped the office with its communication. Whether we're going to be able to implement everything, I don't know, because it's a great idea, and I think there's going to be some type of balance here. But I was glad to hear you bring that up. And I also think that, I mean, we're not ready for an integral party, but I do think it would be nice if we had some type of happen. It would be nice if one of our parties became more integral. Brandon talked about, I forget how you phrased it, but it's not going to happen. But there is a No Labels. Has anybody heard of No Labels? It's a very interesting organization where they try not to get into identity politics, so there's no labels. But they are getting on the ballot in all 50 states. And if in 2024, our only options are Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they are going to try to put a third candidate on the ballot. And it would probably be a Democrat and a Republican. Okay, so which one would be president and vice president? I don't know. But they're a very interesting group. I would look them up. NoLabels.org. They have some very interesting conferences about every week or two. They bring in senators. Joe Lieberman was on last week. It's a very interesting group of people, but I forget again how you said it, Brandon. It's sort of a fool's gold or something.
I think of it kind of like as the tail wagging the dog.
Right. Well, I mean, you had another game, false game, or lose something.
Game denial.
Game denial.
Yeah,
right.
There we go.
I mean, you're just not recognizing how politics really works.
Like third parties or independents,
right.
And any sort of like two-party system is like dead on arrival. So it's not an avenue for that.
probably true, and it would worry me that they would just steal votes away from the better side, and we wind up with the fascist side or something being elected. But so I guess the only thing I'd other add is that we had developmental politics with Steve McIntosh, and he talked a lot about social change and how you really have to appeal to values. You have to get rid of the tribalism. And when first like Black Power came out or gay pride came out, they when they felt their oats, so to speak, they were as flamboyant and crazy as possible. And the afros were as big as they could be, and the chains and the colored shirts and things. And the gay people were as just flaming as they could be. And all it did was scare people. But then when they just toned it down and just said, hey, we're not trying to be that different. We're actually just trying to be the same. We're just trying to be married like the rest of you. We're just trying to make a life with a family and have a job like everybody else. And when they appealed to those core values, there was a lot more acceptance of their status. And so even though we probably can't get a third party, if we can get one of the parties to start going back to values and what we really, if they can really articulate what we need, and our parties aren't so tribal, I hope that'll save us. And I hope my plumber will save me too. So.
All right, Bill, thank you. Thank you for bringing back some good memories from Sedona Integral Conference. So I'm going to do a quick coffee cup, and then we'll go to Paul's quick coffee cup, and then to Sphere, and then Brandon. Okay. All right. So I love Holacracy, and I know I was like brimming over with caffeinated joy when I was watching that presentation. I went and talked to the guy. I bought his book. And but it's funny because I just finished reading or listening to this book called Lab Rats by, I think it's Daniel Lyon. I just looked it up. Dan Lyons. And he basically goes through a bunch of like experimental systems that Silicon Valley uses that make people's lives really terrible. And I find it interesting from looking at it at the spiral level because it's basically taking people who just want to be told what to do every day. They just come in and they don't want to be responsible. They don't want to make decisions. They don't want to think about agile, like what's working, what's not working. They don't want to have any extra responsibility. Basically interviews people like that who then get put into agile organizations or holacracy organizations, and they're just having mental breakdowns. They're just so upset. But he does this from this like angry, Silicon Valley is destroying our lives. It's really a very entertaining or maybe sad look at the clash between people becoming responsible for things that they should have control over, and this like becoming a more grown up and taking responsibility and being like, yes, life is hard. I'm going to have to make hard decisions. So if you want to see the other side of Holacracy, that book interviews people, and he just berates Holacracy like it's the silliest thing on earth. I personally think Holacracy is great. I don't know exactly how to do it in real life. I have a tiny little company, and I guess I kind of do that with my one colleague. Anyways, okay, that was my coffee cup. Paul, your coffee cup is ready now.
And two things. One gets, Susan, I wanted to thank you for, I had not really heard of the idea of holacracy. And I realized it's, that term really kind of got at the heart of what I was trying to say about, those cities in the United States that have city managers and mayors. I mean, it's that blending of, and I called it blending of the autocratic and the democratic. So thank you for that. Which then I wrote a note, learn more about it. So what's the name of the book and who was the author?
I posted a website. That's probably the first place to go.
Okay, but is there a book too?
Brian Robertson,
Brian Robertson.
and I think the book's just called Holacracy. There might be a subtitle.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take down my coffee cup.
All right, to Sphere.
Thank you. I just want to speak about holacracy, which have a lot of benefit when it's come to organizations, especially modern organization. And there is a light version of holacracy that's been researched much more called the self-management. And Frederic Laloux is lecturing a lot about it. So it's easier to understand, I think, Frederic Laloux than holacracy, self-management. And Ook van Dijk, I forgot the name of this Dutch spiral dynamic teacher. He was here. He is researching and is implementing self-management and holacracy in some places. And what he's arguing, I'm agreeing with, is that holacracy and self-management is it needs some condition to work, and we might find it good for companies, but it's really not for changing politics. Why is that? It's important to understand it, so we don't think that holacracy can change politics. Because holacracy, the main thing that is done is creating an environment of decision-making, working without hierarchy. It's actually fighting hierarchy and give a new structures that enable people to work together without hierarchy, which is need a lot of communication. This is why it's working in small groups. But when you are looking about millions of people in population, it's difficult to implement. The second thing is that even in small organization, it's failing a lot because the people in the organization need to have a strong green and some yellow values. So if people have like orange, blue, and red, like we have in most of our in the world population, they are not able to understand it and to operate with it. They are using the system. This is why it's dangerous to try to use it in a country scale, because they will use the system. And this is why when we are looking about solving problems that they created by red, blue, we have to think about a different system or different vision to improve democracy. This is my reaction about holacracy. But if you can manage it in your company, it's amazing if you have the right people.
All right, thanks to Sphere. Brandon.
Hi. Yeah, so I guess this is like a bit of a follow-up to what Susan was saying earlier, where what we're kind of struggling with is the toxic or unhealthy expression of the red, blue, orange, and green value memes. So kind of in my mind, there's like systems like way of thinking about this, conflicts that are happening. There's a supply and a demand side to these value conflicts. So the demand side is just kind of naturally kind of like what happens when you have like groups of millions of people in societies that are changing at a rapid pace. So you have portions of the public that are feeling existentially threatened by some of the changes that are happening in society. So that's the demand side. But on top of that, and this is very problematic, you also have a supply side to these problems, where you have organizations and groups that see there's like a fire and are intentionally pouring gasoline on that fire to exacerbate existing societal divisions. So I wonder if maybe one use of the arena of politics like that could actually be productive is trying to limit the ability of organizations and groups to exacerbate societal divisions. For example, like we had a talk a few weeks back about the role the media plays in this. So I wonder, like, if just kind of limiting the avenues for using that to attain wealth and power might be like maybe an arena for using politics.
Sounds good. Let's put it on the wish list, Brandon. All right, cool. Thank you so much. All right, David, someone we haven't heard from yet.
Hey guys. I haven't been able to be here for all the discussion, so I apologize if I show lack of awareness of the parts that I missed, but I heard most of it, and like a lot of interesting things that you guys brought up, and I kind of took a few notes of some ideas here. And one theme that I am kind of hearing, especially with the idea of holacracy being like kind of another level, is this idea of trying to think of democracy not as a, you know, either we have it or we don't, but as a spectrum and as a degree of which we are constantly working towards more democracy as we get better at organizing more complex systems and more representation and more forms of participation for more people in that democracy. And what I kind of see is like we're getting to the point where current systems are not able to meet the demands of the problems. In the United States, like a two-party duopoly is just too simplistic to deal with the level of complexity of systemic problems that we're facing, and the sort of this or that, this solution or that solution is just not going to solve systemic crises that are ongoing. And the same way globally, we've got global problems where, you know, there has to be some intercooperation. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll have to rejoin you.
All right, to be continued. So I'm going to raise my hand then. Okay, so there's a book called The Dictator's Handbook. Has anyone read that book? Anyone? Okay, so there's a summary of this book that is called Rules for Rulers. Has anyone else heard about that thing? It's like extremely viral short video that is it's really, really well done. So let me just give some very quick overview. The gist of it is that people who are people who want to be in power have to do all of these ridiculous things to get into power and to stay in power. And dictators have, like, they'll die if they get out of power. And of course, democracy, usually they don't die, but they, have to go and do something else and make a library, basically. So this whole thing, he has 4 keys, or the rules for rulers is a summary, which is extremely well done, and I've watched it countless times, and I've made my husband watch it, and I've made other people watch it. I don't know if the one I just linked is the right one, but so the rules for rulers is really a good thing. Basically, when you're finished with it, you realize that the people who are in power have been through the ringer. And if you think you're going to get into power and not have to go through that, you're just deluding yourself. And I will tell you more about it and paste the points in after we go to David. Welcome back. We want to hear what the rest of your points were. It was really going
Sorry
well.
about that. I had an interruption that was completely out of my control. So, and like, I think we have global issues where like each country deciding to do its own thing is not going to work either. There has to be some sort of level of global consensus, global cooperation. And how will we ever set up a system where that can happen? I've been spending a lot of time like listening to people that are kind of outside of the mainstream of the political spectrum, and listening to the debates and attempted solutions that they're coming up with. I'm aware of one attempt of a integral political party that was attempted and failed. I'm posting a link to it there. You can read their story, but it was an attempt, and it seems like there's kind of like three sort of paths that I hear being discussed. One is trying to take over an existing party and change it to become, something more integral. The second would be to start a new party, which is what they tried to do in Denmark. They're a completely new party. And then the third method that is discussed is just to work outside of the system completely and build something new, completely outside the system, which is a lot closer, I think, to what Brandon was talking about with like social change movements. The reality is it may take some of all of the above. I don't know if there's a right answer there. Maybe there is. Another area where I've been exploring a lot that resonates with this discussion is I've found some areas in independent media where their model is they have a, anti-mainstream left-winger and an anti-mainstream right-winger, and they discuss the daily news and try to find the areas where they agree and have a common ground. And their idea is like, how can we form a new center that's unique and different than the current center that's not working? And as far as like building something new, I think one of the methods, like how do we do that? And I think it's really important to think about the importance of imagination and play. And when trying something for the first time, like do it in a context where the stakes are really low. And I think of like even modeling like with like preschoolers or something. It's like, let's do a model where we build a sandcastle and have everyone in the preschool class like come up with their ideas of like what they want this thing that we build to include. What are their concerns? What are their needs? What do they want part of this? And just have a practice of listening to each other and coming up with a collective design that fits this collective narrative of what we're trying to build, but in a playful, like low stakes way. And then as you build, like the stakes increase and increase and increase until you finally are like building systems where you're talking about actual, power and resources and multinational global problem solving. That's going to take a long time. And for something important like the climate crisis, I don't know if we have that time.
That
Anyway.
sounds really great. I just realized my hand is still up. Thank you, David. Great. So we just need to get hired at a kindergarten.
Right?
That's the next step. I really totally believe that the children are the future. I've heard that before. Okay, Brandon, you're up.
Oh, yeah. So maybe I should clarify one thing. So I do think that actual transformative change is going to happen culturally, not politically. But that said, it is important to not use that as an excuse to just completely disregard politics and not participate, because that's also a form of game denial. So like what you can do within politics is very constrained as like compared to like the sorts of transformative change we need over generations. You can almost kind of maybe think of it as like a holding action, but those holding actions, they do matter. Just to list like one very obvious example, in the United States, half of our country losing their abortion rights was a direct result of a 2016 election where Donald Trump was able to put 3 very reactionary judges on our Supreme Court. So again, that's not the arena for transformative change, but the change that does go through can impact people's lives in very direct ways. So it's kind of like a thing where it needs to be like a both and approach.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the consequences are very serious of this. So thank you, Brandon, for bringing that back to our attention. So Steve is here, and that's great. But I just saw Paul put up his coffee cup. So Steve, welcome, and we'll get to you in 1 second. And David, if you have anything else to add, you can keep your hand up. Otherwise, you can bring your hand down so we just can keep track of who's next on the queue. Paul.
And I just wanted to give one more example of what Brandon was saying. You know, he talked about the effect of what happened after Trump was elected. Minnesota, a number of years ago, went through a generational transformation in 1 year. I can't remember. I don't remember the exact year, but starting at year one, there was a constitutional amendment put to the vote to ban gay marriage. Now, this is Minnesota. This was a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage. Now, it lost. It didn't pass, but it wasn't resoundingly rejected, but it didn't pass. And during the ensuing year, the LGBTQ community really went out, and what they did was they talked to people who basically, and if I had to categorize it, people who'd formed their opinions around gay marriage and gay issues in general, people whose opinions were formed in their childhood by their upbringing. And they talked to them, and what they did is they asked them to, they said, oh, do you know anybody who's gay? Well, yeah, I guess I do know, Uncle Fred or whatever. And through this process of getting them to think about how they form their views on this, think about their thinking process. They did this for a year, and the next year, the next election cycle, maybe it was 2 years total, but a constitutional amendment was passed in Minnesota to allow gay marriage, not ban it, to codify it that gay marriage is legal. And that was accomplished, that's a generational type of change, a cultural generational change that in most cases is seen as taking an entire generation. It was done through a deliberate process in 1 year.
There you go. That's how we do it. Paul, that was really good. It gave me a lot of hope. Thank you. All right, Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, sorry I'm late. I had a few things to do. I'm sad to have missed the conversation to this point, but happy to be here now and to be able to participate. I just wanted to pick up on a few of those themes, on David's theme and on Brandon's theme, and maybe even Paul's there. As David was talking about play, I kind of suddenly a little light went on for me, because I think part of the problem, particularly with the polarization you see, especially in the US, is the fact that people take everything too seriously. So it's very hard to shift your position if everything's very solidly real and fixed and high stakes, if you see what I mean. Whereas play kind of creates the space to allow for kind of flexibility and reimagining. So I kind of, I don't know, suddenly I kind of thought, well, maybe he's right. Maybe we need a hell of a lot more play at all levels and all ages. And maybe we need to be creatively replaying difficult situations that we find in our life and in society or whatever, just to see if there are other ways. Because I think if you have people in entrenched positions and the stakes feel very, very real and high to them, how are they ever going to kind of reconcile? How are you ever going to have any kind of common ground? And the cultural shift you're talking of, Brandon, I think is because basically we're never going to find new values through politics. Politics will only ever be a kind of expression of values that try to align power with values. But to overcome this sort of dichotomous, fractured societies people are experiencing now, the only way we can do that is by finding new values that people can come together around, and then eventually they may express in politics. And I think that's a bit like Paul was saying, when the conversation changes, people can find a ground on which to unite. And another kind of very similar example was in Ireland. They were trying to get through, put gay marriage on the statute. And the activist community there realized that basically what's strong in Ireland is the family. And the only way they could get this, over what was a very large hurdle of Irish conservatism, was to appeal to the family. So all their messaging was around, what if it's your son, your daughter? And somehow that really resonated with Ireland, and they won the vote. So it's if we only frame politics and the underlying value things in antagonistic terms, we will only end up with antagonism. that's kind of inevitable. It's only by trying to find new values and new creative approaches to which we can forge new shared values, despite our diversities, that we'll find anything to coalesce around, I think. But there we are. Thank you. That's my response.
I'm so glad we're starting to get some really good answers here. Barbara's joining too. Okay, so Marjorie and then Barbara.
Hi, everybody. I'm following this discussion and really finding it fascinating. And I kind of wanted to bring in an aspect of what's happening in the spiritual communities. And I'm a member, I guess you could say, of a New Thought organization, and following a friend of mine who's a leader in that organization and is also well-versed in spiral dynamics. His name is Dr. Jim Lockgard. And he has a blog called The New Thought Evolutionary. And he just recently put up a post kind of putting it to that community that, either that community needs to reform or innovate, or it's going to die, So because a lot of these churches and this type of philosophy is struggling, like many things are struggling. And so it comes down to a point of either do or die, And so I responded to his post. And my kind of thinking about that is, yes, it is do or die, but then that is part of life in general. Everything is going to die anyway. Death is not a choice. And so in order to kind of move along the spiral, the main where New Thought is right now is at green, and actually not a very healthy green. And in order to get up to second tier, green is going to have to die, or it's going to have to go away, or it's going to have to reform, or it's going to have to evolve. And so if it doesn't evolve, it will die. And so I think for my response to it, it's holding both of those opposites, the tension of the opposites of the polarity between life and death, and that both are happening simultaneously. And so that if you can hold the tension of those opposites and recognize that life is part of death and death is part of life, and that both are happening simultaneously, and that you sort of, hospice that what is dying while you're simultaneously midwife what is emerging. If you can do that, in other words, to hold, that's the entire thing, which is a second tier capacity. And since most of society is not at second tier, that's where the challenge is that we need leaders and people who can hold the tension of those opposites, so that that transition between life and death and then the rebirth can occur. And even if you can't, it's going to happen anyway, one way or the other. Things are going to die and something else is going to going to be born, at least from my perspective anyway. So I just kind of wanted to put that into the mix. And I love this discussion as always. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for giving us all a good wake-up call, Marjorie. Nothing like a good dose of reality. We're all gonna die. And it reminds me of the scientific revolutions, happen with the death of every scientist, right? So each scientist dies and the new paradigm comes in. So thanks for that
You're welcome.
dose of reality. And Barbara, it looks really cold, way colder than me. Coming from your car.
Actually, it's up to 10. It's up to 10 degrees now. It got down to 0 overnight.
Welcome,
and
Barbara.
-10 the night before. So I once had the opportunity to work with a woman who was deeply immersed in turquoise. And she thought that my energy was a lot of the typical Hindu destroyer goddess energy. And so she said to me, that's really important. There is stuff that just has to go in order to make room for the new. But consider some of it just needs to be cut down, but a lot of it needs to be hospiced, right? And I really took that to heart, and I work really hard to distinguish between things that need to be actively stamped out before something new can possibly grow, things that are just irrelevant. And I will tell you that 90% of the things that we worry about in the overall scheme of the things are probably irrelevant, right? And they're just things that distract us from the bigger picture. And then to know those things that are truly good and served so well in their time, and they're no longer appropriate for life conditions. So we need to hospice them gently so that people can let go of them and move on, and with as little trauma as possible. And the other thing we need to have that we don't have at all, I think, because there aren't good examples of positive versions of any of the V-memes out there anymore. We need to give people places to land, right? I mean, my orange had places to land in positive orange tech communities 60 years ago. Nowadays, I mean, I know only a handful of people that I would still say are in positive orange. Most of them who are still stuck there were just totally swallowed up. And postmodern green has become so negative. You talk to them about moving on, and they just sort of say, "You expect me to look at the world like that guy?" And my answer is, no, I couldn't tell you that, right? So it's very hard. And maybe what we're talking about here is a combination of the yellow ability to destroy what needs to destroy, and the turquoise ability to hospice what needs to be hospiced. And we need to look really, really hard at combining those two in a positive way to let us move forward. And the other thing that really pops up to my mind is Harari's work, right? About people just getting sucked into an identity that has to do with nowadays a political party, sometimes a religious orientation, to the point where that's their only identity. And no matter how bizarre what's happening within that organization to which they identify, how can they get out? Because that's where their identity is. And I think, Paul, when you brought that example up, people in the Midwest 60 years ago were not brought up with that kind of stuck identities. Most of the communities there had vibrant blue and orange, and even some emerging green, right? And so they weren't as stuck as they are now and polarized. And so it's much easier to say to folks my age, don't you know someone? But as you go down to folks that were no longer raised in those vibrant multi-mimetic communities, their answer is no, I've never been introduced to one. Literally, right? We're much more insular. We move into communities of people like us. The old mixed communities where 2 blocks over was your maid, that just isn't there anymore. So I don't know how we deal with that, because you have to know people as human beings to work with them, and we don't so much anymore. Otto Scharmer has this methodology of going and walking around in communities where you don't normally tread. So of course, all the green immediately go to the low income minority slums, right? And think that's getting out there. So I suggested to our group in Madison that we go to one of the local rifle clubs and understand their position on firearms. I was drummed out. I mean, literally, they were so mad at me. And I said, aren't we talking about understanding everybody at every level and getting outside of our comfort zones? Well, not those evil people. It was just like, so what do we do with that level of polarity? And I don't know, but it's killing us. It is literally killing us. And I've been working with Braver Angels, and I don't see that they're making a dent among people who aren't so stuck in the polarities, right? but they're not making a dent with the neighbors who still think that I'm evil because I dared to talk to a Republican yesterday, or the other neighbor who thinks I'm evil because I dared to talk to a Democrat yesterday. And I mean, they mean that literally to their souls, that I should treat them like the devils that they are. So I don't know where we go, because that's different than folks who just literally don't know about gay rights, and who've never thought about the people that they know, and it's easy to say to them, so is Joe's daughter an evil woman? Oh, heck no, she's one of the nicest people I ever met. And that's the end of the argument against gay marriage, right? Whereas this, it's different somehow, right? It's deliberate, and the cancel culture, and I'm sorry, red has it as bad as blue, right? And I mean that in political terms. This cancel culture thing of you don't dare complain about your friends, right? You don't dare call them to task on anything that they're doing that's outrageous. You have to save all your energy for yelling at the enemy when it's the enemy in your own gates that you need to worry about. And I don't know what to do about that. I haven't seen very adequate solutions proposed. We're very much down into some deep purple belonging issues, and getting kicked out of those dysfunctional tribes is so painful for people. I don't know where we go with that.
Wow, Barbara, you came and brought a lot of very hot, good questions. So I also have been a little bit involved in Braver Angels, and I'm using my coffee cup right now, not my moderator cup or hat. So I think it is preaching to the choir. Like the people who join Braver Angels, they already are like, oh, maybe we do need to listen to the other side. Because I got trained as a moderator, and I think it's a really great program. But I think there might be an interesting solution to this around an issue, a local issue. So if people are like, we have this lake in our city called Lake Merritt. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. And there's a volunteer group that goes out there and cleans it every Saturday. I haven't been yet because it's been like raining and crazy things, but I'm planning to go out there. And I think that when you're working in the trenches in a local issue that's going to make everyone's lives better, right? Like just cleaning the garbage and the pollution out. I think that's a good way because then you start talking to someone who also cares about that local issue and you realize, oh, wow, this person is completely different than me and they're a completely different party and everything, but they're not an evil person. Like they actually care about this. And so that might be a good path, like just get out of your house and go do something, especially around a local issue. That might help people. What do you think?
Have we talked to this group about Cappy?
Cappy?
Yeah, it's an Adidas term. It's the coalescence of
Power.
authority, power, and influence brought together around a specific issue, and usually local or in the organization or in the community. And the idea is that all these big national things, shoot, I mean, you can't even know where to start, right? But once you find a local issue, you can find people who have the authority to do something, people who are influencers with no authority, but everybody goes and talks to Grandma Jones about this, right? We wouldn't think to do it. And power, right? The guy without a formal city government title, but with all the money in the community, that kinds of things. And to bring them all together around an issue which is hard for anybody to agree we shouldn't tackle, right? And it's normally done not with a solution in mind, but with a predicament in mind, right? So I began looking for the folks who just care about it, and then we go to find the influencers, we go to find the somebody with power, we go to find who the appropriate authority folks are, and we try to bring that together with a community to really define the issue. Because often everybody jumps to their own idiot solution, and I mean that literally everybody, right? Without understanding the problem in its complexity. And so we end up with 50 idiot solutions on the table, and we still don't even have a well-defined problem. And when you define the problem, often 49 of those solutions come off immediately because they're either make things worse in the overall or aren't germane to the actual problem that the community is facing. So that sort of methodology is very good. So maybe we need to do a program on that if somebody wants to make a note. And the other thing is, have we done a program on Don's ACE assimilation?
Not reverse. It's I think he did write, but he did write one more tied in on Cappy, but he introduced the concept in this managing corporate life cycles.
Yeah, and so we can.
You're right. It's a very powerful concept.
It is, and it really tells how social systems work, right?
Well,
from the bottom up.
Yeah, it's also what it's also the principle and concept and process that Beck used in South Africa.
And he added to that something called ACE, the assimilation contrast effect. And I talked about it without identifying it, but I do want to identify it. It seems like a couple of us have talked about it here before. I'm not sure we ever did a presentation on it, but what it basically says is political systems, when they break, become defined by their most extremist idiot ideas, which is America certainly in spades, and the folks on one side or the other are so busy yelling at the enemy that they can't actually turn around behind them and see that the nutcases on their own side are the problem, not the other side, right? And I'm using that in very vernacular, but that's the way it plays out. So Don did a lot of work with groups about just casting off your extremists. Stop worrying about the other side. Your own people are your problem. You know, they're not anywhere near the majority on your own side. They're never constructive, right? You know, they have destructive devils in them, I'm going to say. They have the negative Cali principle of destroy, destroy, destroy. So so he really worked a lot with both sides in South Africa, trying to get them to identify on their own side. You know, stop worrying about the mote in your neighbor's eye, right? Look at what's in your own eye. And it worked pretty well. You know, they would people would suddenly start to turn around and say, "Oh my gosh, you know, what Helen said was worse than what the folks on the other side said. Did that really come out of her mouth?" You know, and it does, right? We've all heard those horrible exchanges, and so I think that's also something that we definitely need to work on as a skill we can develop locally.
You know, Barbara, I wanted to real quickly comment on a couple of things you said. I gotta lower my hand. Okay, no, never mind. I gotta take my coffee cup down. I really liked what you. Okay, first of all, the one bit I totally agree with you is what. Where do we go with an issue where there's people who just aren't going to get it, you know? And I guess part of the solution is to recognize that there are issues and there are circumstances in which there are people who are just not going to be able to contribute to it and are not going to add anything to it. And you could probably count on them to try to block positive process. But the good
even
side,
when it's proposed by their own side, right? And I think that's really critical.
Yeah. But to me, the one nice thing, or the silver lining in that dark cloud, is that you don't have to change everybody. I think Brandon. I think it was Brandon who quoted. He said that Wilbur speculates that in order to get true integral thinking into the society, you need at least 10% of the people. You don't need everybody to go along with what you're saying. You just need enough of them.
And Don would have said, no, you just need to make the green, orange, and blue healthy. Well, you don't need to have anything like 10% at second tier. You just need to have those folks at second tier working night and day to make the other tiers healthy.
Right, which gets to my second point, is, I mean, I totally agree with you that I think a lot of the problems with, I'm just going to overly generalize with Orange right now, is there's a lot of powerful people who are clearly centered in Orange. Orange is, as it's manifesting in the world today, it's Orange that's killing the planet, let's be honest.
Oh yeah, I mean, Graves would have said it's outrun its ability to deal with its life conditions, and it's doubling down on its stupid solutions.
Right. And one possible, I'm not saying that this is the answer, but one possible way to deal with that, because I also agree that part of the problem is that we, out of the gate, Green has not put its best foot forward. And so if you think in terms of evolution, of a shift to a higher V mean, that's probably not in the cards for a bunch of business executives who are making all their decisions based solely on their own view of capitalism. Of the way you pursue capitalism is you maximize the return on investment of the investors.
Right.
I think it's possible to point backwards in time. Look at the origins of Orange. look at the origins of capitalism. You know, the issue is
Right.
not that profits are bad and they're evil, and the only solution to orange is to make it, or companies can't make profits or tax all their profits away and to kill all the executives. Go to the origins of orange, where the benefits of profit and the benefits of orange were producing the good things that it did, and point those executives in that direction.
But I think, one of the things that we don't deal with as much as we probably should, there's been some studies by the psychopathologists about business executives, and a number of them seem to test sociopaths to even borderline psychopath. And I think that's because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. For those of you who haven't been in organizations that were headed by a sociopath, you may not quite see this, but what happens is, folks who are willing to first bend the rules and then absolutely do anything to get ahead in that organization, then that naturally pulls people who had even a tiny tendency towards psychopathology to gravitate to that organization and to the higher ranks of that organization. And so what happens is you have folks making the decisions who would quite frankly murder their own grandmother to get ahead in the company or in the world, right? And that's probably beyond the orange pathology of shadow and into the psychopathology realm, and it becomes self-selecting, right? Because we all know people who have turned around and left massive organizations as the managements became more and more pathological, right? I mean, I know Google escapees who go, well, when it turned from don't be evil to how evil can you be, I left, right? And so that's a real problem, and maybe we don't often look at the catalytic effect of shadow and really nasty pathological dysfunctions as much as we should, because those things, I mean, you look at things about the Roman Empire and some of the things around Caligula and Nero, and was just typical psychopathologies of red, right? And so I don't know what we do about that, but I think we need to be aware of it, because then I have friends who describe the average corporate manager and average federal employee as useful idiots who in order to keep their job and their petty power, they're not sociopaths, but it's just too easy to go along to not be canceled, right? To not, I mean, you've seen what happens to whistleblowers. So it becomes so easy to just go along to keep from sleeping under a bridge with your starving kids. I don't know where we go with that, because the level of corruption then keeps going up and up, as you see an end of empires everywhere, right?
So I just want to make an official announcement that we are in the last moments of the official meeting today. And I feel like we've really got it all figured out. We have a plan. Number one, change culture. Number two, all the existing leadership needs to die. Number three, everyone needs to be enlightened.
To play.
And then there you go, a plague. Anyways,
So
I think.
So Beth, we are 4 minutes from the top of the hour. Probably this would be a good time to stop the recording. Do you want to do an official farewell,
Yes.
whatever, and then I'll stop the recording?
Thank you all so much for coming here and helping us solve this extremely challenging issue. So things that, like a summary, go meet people who have different opinions and encourage people in your community to go out and do something local. Read all the books that have been listed in the chat today. Read them all, and then come back when you're done and change culture, make lots of movies about whatever is the next thing we need to fix, and don't forget to vote. So thank you all for being here. It's been at least fun to listen to all the opinions. And that ends are officially moderated. People are free to stay and continue the conversation. But thank you.